I want to thank you for having me today, and of course I want to introduce Brian Knapp, who is one of the staff members at ClearPath, and we'll get into a little bit about how Brian found us. But most importantly, I'm really very pleased to see this room filled. I think that's really an important message for me to see, that our community really does care about this very, very important issue. Before I move any further, I would like to ask anybody in the room that has served in the military, if you could please stand and identify yourself. Is there anybody here that's ever served? And if you please stand. Come on, don't be bashful. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. I always do that because I think it's important for the community to be comfortable with asking people who have served in the military to identify themselves. And one of the taglines that I think really I repeat a lot is that healthy veterans transform communities, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today because I think it's very important. And certainly as we dive into our PowerPoint, we're going to talk about the history and the culture of ClearPath. And a lot of our culture is about the fact that veterans / we call them warriors are members of our community, and they're very important members of our community. ClearPath and its founders, one of the founders is my sister and the other one was a retired Air Force colonel. We have not done anything different than communities have done over thousands and thousands of years. However, modern day society and communities have had a very varying response to supporting our warriors based on political view. So we're going to really talk a lot today about the warrior culture because that really is a very, very important part of what we do. And there's my aunt who just walked in. That was my dad's sister, in case anybody was curious. So just a little bit of a historical. I'm going to kind of give you some statistics to kind of think about as we enter into this presentation. I am going to read you a statement that was made, and a lot of you that have heard me speak before have heard me read this, but I'm going to do it again. And if anybody in here can identify who said this, please let me know. It says, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their nation." Does anybody know who said that, or want to take a guess at who said that?
Eisenhower?
Lincoln, Eisenhower, Busha? Maybe. It was actually a quote from George Washington, right during the Revolutionary War. And how ironic that that quote is what we all refer to today. Because if we look at our veterans as warriors of our community, we have a responsibility to care for them from cradle to grave. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to read you another quote, and let's see if you know who said this one. It says, "With malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations."
Lincoln.
Yes. And the reason most of us are more familiar with that quote is because it's all over the VA. It is what the VA uses. It's on their wall. It reminds everybody every day that it is the community's responsibility to support. Okay. Last but not least, we're going to get into the history and culture here shortly, but I do want to point out that when I entered into this space of working with veterans, I really had no understanding of the military or warrior culture other than the 99% of the rest of the people who have that same perspective, which is, yeah, go, but don't involve me. I will say that Recently, I got an article that was sent to me by a Vietnam veteran, and it said that America's military and America's farmers have something in common. And that is that the entire nation loves the military and they love our farmers. But they don't want to be in the military, and they don't want to be farmers, and they don't want their children to be in the military, and they don't want their children to be farmers. And I thought that that was rather interesting. So I like to point that out, and usually I'll say, are there any farmers in the room? Please stand, because we embrace you as well. But I think that what would we do without our warriors, and what would we do without our farmers? We would be really hard up. So when ClearPath first started, I had a lot of people in the military that gave me a chance to earn their trust. And they gave me books to read, and they offered their hand out to say, we trust you, but don't mess it up. And one of the people that came to me was a Vietnam veteran, and he was in the Marine Corps. He was Force Recon, which, Brian, you'll have to excuse me, because Brian was in the Marine Corps if I get this wrong. That's a form of special forces. And in Vietnam, I think the life expectancy for a Force Recon guy that's dropped in the middle of the jungle was like 5 seconds. I mean, it was basically you were gonna go in and die. However, he lived. And when he came out, he did not have the supportive community. So he had to rely on others to provide him with information that could give him the support that he needed. So he was given a book. It was called Once a Warrior, Wired for Life. Oh. And he walked in one day and he says, if you're gonna work with us, you better read this. I'm like, okay. He says, I'll check back with you in a week and see what you think of it. It's like, okay. So I did, I read it, and in there I found this quote. It says, boys, and now girls, with a normal viewpoint are taken from the fields, offices, and factories and put into ranks. They are made over and made to about face, to regard death and murder as sometimes the order of the day. But shoulder to shoulder, they are entirely changed. We use them for a while, and then suddenly we discharge them and ask them to make another about face. This time, they are asked to do this on their own, do all their own self-adjusting with no officer's aid or advice. Sometimes they are no longer needed, and they are then scattered into their communities, sometimes without parades or speeches. Too many of these fine warriors are eventually destroyed mentally because they could not make the final about face alone. Any guess on when that was written? Well, it was written between World War I and World War II by Smedley Butler, who was a Major General of the U.S. Marine Corps in 1936. He was a two-time winner of the Medal of Honor. So whenever I read that, people will sometimes think, well, that was probably just recently written, but it wasn't. Same message. So I'm gonna just now go into this presentation a little bit because I wanna, we've all seen the effects of combat, whether it be World War II, Korean, Vietnam, and forward. And in the 5,600 years of written human history, it's estimated we've been to war 14,200 times. So that's 2.5 wars a year. Humans fight. Wouldn't it be great if combat went away? But the reality is, it probably won't. So, although there are effects of that, I don't want to paint a picture here that if you've served in the military and you've been in the combat zone, that life is over for you. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And that's what we're going to get into now when we get into the history and the culture of ClearPath. So our mission statement is pretty straightforward, recognizing the responsibility of communities to help those who serve. You can read the rest. And you'll notice that first line is recognizing the responsibility of communities. In other words, remember I was telling you when everybody went off to protect and serve, I said, that's great, just don't involve me. You know, I'm guilty as charged, and I am now committed to spending the rest of my life advocating and educating for the population, from which I have learned so much. And my hope today is that it inspires you in some way, shape, or form to just take something away. Like I always say, take what you like and leave the rest. And we'll get into ways that you can support and help later on. The vision to become the premier community-based veteran service member and family-focused organization. Being centrally located in the state helps, and that is our goal. And we like to think we're achieving that. So the history, there are 3 co-founders. My partner in crime to the left is my sister Melinda. In the center is that Air Force colonel that came looking for a dog trainer. And then of course, that's me with shorter hair. But the story is pretty simple. I was a dog trainer at a very difficult time in my life. I had actually gone into dog training during some real personal struggles, and I'll share that with you in a minute. But when I met that guy in the middle, he sparked something in me, and it was his ability to express vulnerability and weakness, but yet not feel sorry for himself. And I loved that. And I said to him, I don't know who the hell you are, but I want to help, and how can I help? And then one thing led to another, and my sister came on board as well. I met Steve actually in December of 2010, you'll appreciate this. He was looking for a dog trainer for the Dogs to Vets program, and I blew him off because I thought, I'm doing so much for the community. I don't want to work with veterinarians anymore. I'm too swamped. And he kept calling me, and I said, listen, I already work with some veterinarians in the community. He says, no, this is veterans, not veterinarians. So, that was my first his first forgiveness of me and my ignorance. So, my sister and I did come up with the funds and the resources to acquire the property and to put the loan on the property to do the renovations. And then in August of 2011, we did receive our 501c3 approval. Formal ribbon cutting in September of 2011, and then we had our first fundraiser in December of 2011. And in my dog training world, I had the privilege of making some really good friends. One of them was Doug and Helen Marone, who was the head football coach at Syracuse, went to Buffalo, and now he's in Jacksonville. And their support early on of the vision and the mission really gave us the leg up that we needed. And we also had some political leaders within the state that recognized there was a need. So we got a lot of upfront support, which made it happy or easy to do. Why we're here, that is my dog Maddie. Plain and simple. Maddie was adopted in 2003, shortly after I had probably my 14th surgery for something called endometriosis.
Well,
So when you look at me, you think healthy, happy, strong woman. I am. But a very basic thing, I couldn't have any kids. Simple as that. Imagine being a woman without having any children. Imagine hanging out with a bunch of women that have children. What do you think you do when you can't do that? You hang out with men, right? Or you isolate. So in my family business, everybody knows the trials and tribulations of a family business. I had a good friend say to me, you need to do something different. And I said, I'm not doing anything different. I am meant to do this, and that's life, and leave me alone. And she said, why? I just went out west, and they have these doggy daycares. And there's a lot of people out there that don't have kids. And a lot of these people bring their dogs to doggy daycare. And I said, stupidest thing I've ever heard, I'm not doing it. So I ignored her. I brought my dog Maddie to her. She had like 8 dogs, and the long and the short of it is her visa was pulled. She had to move to Canada. And she called me up again, and she says, you're either gonna do this, or I'm going to sell it. And I wrote a list, and I remember making this list of all the pros and cons of separating myself a little bit from the family business and doing something on my own, and there was a lot of cons. There was more cons than pros. The only pro was that I got to spend more time with Maddie. And I did it. And so the reality is, my own personal journey to Clear Path is, Maddie brought me down a path of service. And in 2007, I got her certified for pet therapy. And that's when I started to visit other places. And I started to do a lot of work in the inner city schools, and I kind of found that I had something to give, even if it wasn't giving birth to children. And I found that I could have a relationship, not just with my own nieces and nephews, which I have a wonderful relationship with, but the love that a woman has as a mother, I get to spread that love. And I've been able now to reconnect with children in a different way, and I'm very grateful for that. That's how we got started, because if I weren't a dog trainer, I would have never met Steve. If I'd never met Steve, we would have never had ClearPath. So I always point that out because I think it's an important story. ClearPath is not just a dog program, but it's just because of the dog. A little bit about our location. We're very centrally located. You'll see the highlighted section there. We serve 20 counties. We have a very aggressive outreach program, which we'll get into our programs and services later. We go all the way up to St. Lawrence County, as you can see. Brian covers the southern tier as well as over into Cayuga. We serve 3 metro areas: Syracuse, Binghamton, Utica, and Rome. The western part of New York State is covered by an organization that is called the Western New York Veteran One Stop. And then Rochester has one as well, and I'm sure you're all surprised, but Albany's a mess, and they do nothing over there. They're very disorganized. However, we've started to kind of go in there, and it's starting to get better. Our facility, if any of you that know my sister personally, she loves to feed people, and you'll see her frequent the Ridge a lot. She's down there a lot, and had a personal relationship with a family up at Fort Drum that they knew for quite some time, and they still keep in touch with them today. So, of course, part of our mission had to include food and bringing people together with food, and you'll see that one photo here. We have a bunch of people probably being fed. Lower picture is our Home for the Brave, which is a home that was completely funded by the community, and that is where our caretaker for the Dogs to Vets program lives. And then that's the aerial view of our basketball court, which were resurfaced by the Jim and Julie Bayhead Foundation. And then upper left, of course, is our view. So go to the next slide, right? We're going to get a little bit into our programs, but hopefully, by looking at these photos, you're going to get an idea of what our programs are. We do have programs specific to ClearPath, but we don't try to build capacity to meet every need. We go out into the community and find what's out there, and then use that in support of our programs and services. So a few pictures. The middle picture above that is Earl. Earl's our chief of staff. He also served in the Army, and he is down at the Ridge, part of our Warrior Golf program. And then there's some food on the lower right-hand corner that was prepared by our executive chef, Adam Coleman. He was also in the Marine Corps. And then we have a ClearPath Kids program. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So a little bit about our culture. Community-based, grassroots, and built on trust. One thing I learned right out of the gate, right starting with Steve, we had to trust one another. And once you build on that trust, you can't blow it. So our entire organization is built on trust, mission first all the time. And that was something that became very important later on as we developed strategy in regards to our funding. Very family-centered. So we include the family in everything that we do. We treat everyone like a family. It's important to accept people for exactly who they are and where they're at in their life before you can help them move forward into integration back into the community. Importance of warrior culture and community. I really want to spend a little time on that. I think one of the important message for those of you that have served in the military as well as those of you that have not, traditional societies, and you'll see a video on this, have typically understood the importance of the elder warrior, which is the person that has served. We refer to this as the life cycle of a warrior. You know, little kids are usually called to serve in some capacity. Probably some of you have children that, I want to be a policeman, I want to be a fireman, and some of you may even have some that want to be in the military. We call that the call of the warrior spirit. That's what traditional Native American cultures call that. You have a desire, an innate desire to protect your community, your family, and the people who live within it. That in turn makes the community value you. You're there to protect and serve. It's just like little kids with their parents. Our warriors are like our community parents. They are called off to do something. They volunteer. I know Vietnam, it was not all volunteer, but at this time, post 9/11, it was all volunteer. They raised their hand after those Twin Towers went down. They said, I want to go and do this. And then they go in and do it, and war is hell. And I think that only those that have experienced it know that. And there's a lot of confusion, and it's not what we always think it is. But that is part of the life cycle of a warrior. There are many, many men and women who have served that have not gone to combat and sometimes struggle more with that their life cycle was never complete because they were never able to do that deed that they're called upon to do. Regardless of whether or not they were in a combat zone, they eventually transition out of that military culture and they come back to their communities. And when they do, that's when we are there to support them and their families. The whole time they're off, never are the warriors or their families left alone. They always have the support of the community. When those warriors come back from combat in particular, they are usually greeted by elder warriors. The elder warriors will take the ones that just came out of a combat zone, they go off into the woods, or they go off somewhere quiet. And those elder warriors do not let those newer warriors out of their sight until they feel they are ready to integrate back in the community, because they understand that once you are in that military and warrior environment, you are forever changed, and it's okay. But not until the elder warriors say it's okay to go back into the community are they ever asked to go back into the community. Quite different than what we do now, right?
Melissa,
Yep.
for the sake of production, could you move closer to the screen so the camera can capture you?
Oh,
A
sorry.
little farther.
No, you were taping me.
Yes, we're taping you. Okay,
Okay.
that's better.
All right. So, that's a very important thing that I like to point out. All right, go to the next slide, Brian. Building an organizational structure and team, this is kind of what we did early on. You can never do anything alone. I think we all know that. Great things happen in teams. Certainly, there's a spark or an inspiration, but nothing can be done alone. So the board of directors was a very important part of what we did. We then created a veteran advisory council that kept a good idea of us at bay. We thought we had a great idea. The veteran advisory council would say yay or nay. Board of directors always listened to them. A huge team of volunteers. Everything we've done has been done by volunteers until we started to get funding, for some of the programs that we have. At the end of 2014, we had 426 volunteers with 8,165 hours. So our facility, our grounds, a lot of what we do, our outreach, our educating the broader community are done by our volunteers. Volunteers play a very important role in what we do, and it also is how veterans that have completed their life cycle as a warrior integrate back into their community. Even if they can never work again, they're there to volunteer because they want to be giving back in some capacity. We do have paid staff. We have now, thanks to a grant we received in 2013 it started, we went from a staff of none, me and one other volunteer, to a staff of 18. The composition of that staff is 14 of those 18 are veterans, 4 are female veterans, and 11 of those vets, and yes, 1 female veteran is a combat vet. Of those 11 veterans, they have a combined 33 deployments. So we are really the only organization out there right now that is walking the walk. In other words, everybody's saying, yeah, hire the vets, send them to school, make them just like us. But the reality is, and I can speak on this, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that easy. Brian's been out for 4 years. A couple of the people that have worked there have only been out a year. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but one of the goals of ClearPath is to be that soft landing pad to teach skills and culture and where we can all come together and set these people up for success. Right now we're involved in what's called the Community Strategic Planning Session. Again, this is not about Melissa, Melinda, and Steve Kinney. This is about you as the community. This is really your job, our job collectively, and our strategic planning sessions are underway now. And we are including the VA, higher education, politicians, staff, and a bunch of others to make sure we get it right. Collaboration is key to everything we do. We can never think we can do it all alone. And so we do, again, work with all healthcare. We work with Krause, Upstate, the VA, higher education, that includes Syracuse University. They've got some great veteran initiatives, but again, higher education can't do it alone. They need the support of community. I always call this the three-legged stool. The stool is never steady if one or two think they can do it all alone. VA and higher education think that's the answer, and they're leaving out community. The stool's not stable. The only thing that suffers would be the veteran. If community thinks they can do it alone, they can. So our purpose, the ClearPath purpose, is to be a single point of access for active duty veterans and their families, so that they can find resources, support, and opportunity within their community. So what we do is take out that confusion. So let's just timeline this for a second. World War II, everybody was behind everybody. Korea, we just went bloop, like it didn't exist. Vietnam, anybody here served in Vietnam? I don't think I need to explain what happened to Vietnam veterans. And thankfully, they're coming to ClearPath now, and in their typical fashion, giving back to those that are now looking and seeking for help. And by the way, is the generation that has taught me more about forgiveness than anybody, and I mean that. And then of course when 9/11 happened, we had a shift of all this support that then became very confusing. So we really are about connecting and supporting and eliminating that confusion. So again, the Veteran Resource and Outreach Center model is about aggressive outreach, and that's kind of a little bit about what Brian does and the staff that are in our Wingman program. And we do not build capacity to meet every need. I think that's really important. That would be unrealistic, and that would be dictatorship. We're there to teach people how to fish, not give them fish. We aren't about handouts, we're about hand-ups. And that is what the Warriors want. They do not want people to feel sorry for them. They do not want people to give them handouts. They need a hand up with understanding and compassion. So, there's our slide of what we do, but you're not going to have to listen to me keep talking, because what I'd like to do is mix this up a little bit to show you some videos. Again, the Dogs to Vets program is our inaugural program, our signature program. It's why we're here. It's an owner-trainer model for those that need a service dog, but we broaden it that anybody that finds the dog to benefit their life and their relationships, will support them and train them. And by the way, everything we do is free to the veteran. So Brian's going to pull up a video of Steve Wantz, who was one of our very first people that went through the program, who now is a dog trainer. He also has a full-time job. He has, at this time, retired his service dog, but got him in a shelter in Oswego. And this video was actually done by someone that served in the Army.
If we reduce the lights just slightly, you don't have to turn over. Thank you.
You're welcome. Close this.
Toby was from a family that was loving, but they just didn't have the time to take care of him. He was outside a lot, so he didn't really get to go inside too often. And I thought, oh man, that's terrible to go through that. In the beginning, Toby had a lot of separation issues. I got down and I went to meet Toby, and he just kind of nuzzled my arm. And that was the first time I met Toby, and it was at that point that I knew this was going to be my dog. You know, he's not a pet, he's my service dog. When I first found out about the Dog to Vets program, I was ecstatic, because I thought, wow, there's actually a program out there that offers service dog for veterans like me with PTSD. You know, and I always knew that there was a therapeutic nature with animals. This isn't a dog training program, it's a vet training program. Now I get to actually grow with him and learn what it takes to train a service dog, and you get to know each other. You know, with the combat issues and everything, you get into the civilian world and you realize you can't really be how you were in the military. They don't expect you to be that way. When I was in Iraq, we watched each other's backs. And when you come into the civilian world, you don't have that anymore. You know, I have a wife, I have kids. I don't know what I'd do without my family, but it's just not the same. I feel like there's this connection with Toby that I only had when I was in the military with my battle buddies. The healing process, it's a long one. It's not instant. We're learning things like how to react to loud noises. When a loud noise goes off that I'm not expecting, I kind of get antsy. Toby does at the same time, but what's great about it is when something like that happens, it's a training opportunity. And I get to focus on Toby and say, good boy, like give him treats and stuff. Which kind of takes my focus off of it, and all of a sudden, I'm not really thinking about that. And it's not bringing me back to Iraq and all the shit that I experienced there. I'm very nervous when it comes to people coming up to me and, oh, hey, how's it going? Like, I wanted to just say, step back and don't come near me and the dog. I've grown because of the program and being able to interact with people a lot differently. I can focus on him, and I'm not focusing on the fact that there's a ton of people around me and get all jittery. It's nice to be able to reach down, and Toby's right there. It's nice to be able to get out of my shell and go and greet other people and have them greet me, and I don't feel nervous about it. I know that since I've had Toby, my wife has seen a huge difference in me. I feel like I don't have to be on medications to be myself again, or to not have my issues with combat that I've had affect me as much anymore. So far, it's been a great adventure. It's exactly what I've been looking for years since I've been out, and it's amazing that I found it.
I think, you know, Steve says it best, the dog is just the dog, and I've seen it so many times. We've got 169 people go through the program, and I cry every time. I mean, how can you not? We had one gentleman, again, we serve all veterans. It's mostly post 9/11, but we do get some Vietnam vets that want to go through the program. And one guy came in, served in Vietnam. He was just so grateful that we were there for him. Oh my God, he left with that dog. It was the ugliest dog I've ever seen. And he loved that dog, and I'll tell you what a wonderful feeling it was. And he said, even if I never get through this program, you've changed my life. That's all we needed to hear. Just that he had a little bit of care, compassion, and he felt like he could fit in somewhere. He and his wife have moved on to, she says, I just haven't seen him this happy. He's cried all week, and I says, well, that's good, because, you know, crying, you know, cleanses the soul, and he's just so happy. So, you know, everybody is different, but the bottom line is the dog is a great bridge to the broader community. Just a couple of quick notes before I show you a couple other videos. We do serve active duty. I want to point out we do something called the Warrior Reset, which is integrative medicine, and we bring in acupuncture, polarity therapy, and therapeutic massage, because one of the #1 complaints is medication. So we do offer Warrior Resets, they're called, which give everybody that serves active duty or has served an opportunity to learn how to just dial things down a little bit. One of the things about warrior training is that you got to wire yourself to be a warrior. Then how do you shut that off? And we are doing it currently for the 174th, which is where the unmanned training is for the pilots of the unmanned aircrafts. And I'm going to tell you, I did a tour and I saw what's going on, and those guys are really, really in some intense multitasking, shall we say. And they come and they learn how to meditate and dim things down. Saturdays are our family resets, so we do offer those same modalities on Saturday, but we do have a Clear Path Kids program, which focuses on wellness and being able to communicate with your children, which I love to do, and I usually bring my dogs as well. The program director actually is at BOCES, and she's a certified volunteer and has all their credentials to work with children, and that works well. The Wingman program, that's where Brian and the majority of our staff work. We have paid peer specialists which do go and they serve as the elder warriors, and we're going to show you a video here in a moment. But they just basically are that initial point of contact when someone walks in the door. And then the peers just help support and help that person identify and navigate what it is they really need. 9 times out of 10, someone will come to the door and say they want to volunteer. Our next question is, when did you get out? A month ago. Do you think they're ready to volunteer? Do you think of that life cycle of a warrior? No. So let's show you a little bit about the Wingman program and the philosophy and concept behind it. You're gonna see a lot of that, you know, again, warrior culture dovetailing in with it. This video was done about a year and a half ago. In traditional societies, well before the VA, well before the GI Bill, there was community, and the community supported the warriors and their families. The vision of ClearPath is that healthy veterans can transform communities. Vets have a lot to offer once they have kind of gone through that life cycle of a warrior, which starts with service and then continues out of military back to service of a different kind.
ClearPath is that place where elders can come in and they can help us younger veterans kind of cope with, you know, going and becoming a warrior, improving ourselves, and then becoming elders ourselves. I feel like people there understand me and what I've gone through, and I feel like I'm part of a community again.
We try to make this feel like a family, a place that's safe, a place where you're not judged. It started with the idea of the Dogs to Vets program, which is the pairing of veterans with shelter dogs and teaching them to train their own dog. That program is really our signature program here, and I think the dog program also reflects that watch your back concept that so many vets miss when they leave the military. So we offer the dog program. We also offer what's called the Wingman program.
The Wingman program takes a veteran that's been around the block a few times, that's figured out how to navigate the VA, that's figured out how to sign up for educational benefits, how to take their military experience and turn it into a resume. And then this Wingman is a peer, a coach that helps them find jobs, get signed up at college, or just to have a friend, somebody to talk to that understands. My war was Vietnam, and after Vietnam, there was not a lot of support for veterans. It's about time that veterans were given the support they needed, and the older veterans want to contribute to that support to help the younger veterans.
The mission is to empower them with traditional and non-traditional resources, programs, services, for them to find their own way, and they need someone to help navigate that process once they come out of that structured military culture.
Because I have Toby, the service dog, I feel like I'm able to kind of go outside the norm and give back to other veterans now because I have Toby and because he's helped me kind of come out of my shell that was built around me from my experience in Iraq. And I realized something I wanted to do was in some way give back to Clear. And the way I would do that is help train other veterans and their dogs. The Family Dog Program is a program that we're offering to veterans or veterans' family members who want to have a well-trained dog at home. I think that for me it's kind of a healing process doing the dog training and working with ClearPath. That end stage where I'm becoming almost like an elder, where I get to help the younger veterans who haven't quite gotten as far as I have.
To me, the rewarding thing is to see veterans go from a point where they're confused, maybe anxious, to a point where they have that under control and are giving back.
And that is the most beautiful thing, to see a strong warrior be at peace and then continue to give.
I would like to see ClearPath become a model that can be replicated in other communities across the state and across the country.
If every person thought outside of themselves, like these men and women who sign on that dotted line and say, pick me, if we all had that same commitment to our community, even if it's just one day a month, we could really make a difference. So we've coined this our service footprint. You know, everybody knows what their carbon footprint is, but I think, you know, the one thing I've learned is that your service footprint is probably more important, and really what you leave behind you for your community. Just quickly, we're going to show you one more video on the Wednesday canteens, but I don't want to miss out that we do have a recreation program. Our Warrior Golf program is statewide. And then we have something called our monthly summit meeting, which brings in all the resources from all over New York State to collaborate and make sure that we're not duplicating services. It makes it really easy for people that are funding us. You know, ClearPath is all privately funded. We do have 2 state grants that give us some flexibility for our Wingman program, and we are subcontracted out by an organization called Soldier On and Catholic Charities, who deal directly with the homeless population. And our peers help support that homeless population after they've been placed in temporary housing. And that's where folks like Brian and others pick up and help them really move forward. And we've had some, you know, great success stories. There are some that aren't. Some people are just not ready. But the point is that we're there forever. So they know when they're ready, they can come back. The next video I'm going to show you is from North Platte, Nebraska. I saw this when I went to a conference in West Point. And when I saw this, for those of us that have lived in this area, we remember Cops Canteen in Chittenango. And you're going to understand why when I saw this, I said to Earl at the time, I said, we have to have a canteen at ClearPath. So we do a canteen every Wednesday, and we do something called the Memorial Canteen, which is similar to what you're going to see here, except we honor someone that is no longer with us with their favorite meal, and we usually have the family come again. This is all free to the veterans. The community sponsors these canteens, and they are prepared by Chef Adam. So we'll go ahead and show you this video. This is during World War II.
Not far from here, just east, a number of miles, is the town of North Platte, Nebraska. Anybody know North Platte, Nebraska? You've been there. North Platte's out there. It's, you know, you gotta want to go to North Platte. In 1941, it was a town of 12,000 people. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 12,000 people at this Union Pacific Railroad hub called North Platte. 10 days later, there was a train coming through with National Guard troops. The word went out it was Nebraska National Guard troops, and so some folks baked cookies and stuff and went down to the train. And they went down to give them some cookies, but they looked in the windows and it wasn't Nebraska guys. It could have been, turned to be Kansas. But they stood there, you know, with the cookies and the cakes and stuff, and finally one young woman by the name of Ray Wilson, a drugstore clerk, said, well, I'm not keeping my cookies. I'm not taking my cookies home. She stepped up and gave them to one of the young men, and then everybody gave her stuff. Immediately after that, when they started moving Army troops through and sailors and stuff, Ray Wilson organized some women, and they decided they were going to meet the trains that came through North Platte, Nebraska. Bob Green, a journalist of Chicago Tribune, has written about this in a book called Once Upon a Time. And they started to meet the trains, and over the next 4.5 years, they organized, mostly women, 55,000 women. And they met every train that came in, sometimes up to 32 trains a day. And the Union Pacific Railway gave the restaurant to them, and they dubbed it the North Platte Canteen. And they got 10 minutes to get off the train. These guys would jump off the train, run in there, and there would be wall-to-wall tables with sandwiches and cakes and pies. One woman said, my job during the war was to make 10 angel food cakes from scratch with turkey eggs every week in the back of that train station. Everything was rationed. People had to give it out of their own goods. Only $5 came from the government, and it was a check from Franklin Roosevelt. Said, I heard you doing some good things out there, and he said $5. The people of these towns like yours, all over that area, came there. During the course of the war, I mean, these guys would jump out of the train, run in there, and there'd be hot coffee, there'd be donuts, there'd be pheasant sandwiches in season. And I said this at the Nebraska Governor's Prayer Breakfast, and the senator came to me afterwards and said, sometimes pheasant sandwiches out of season. And they'd get back on the train, and they'd go off, many never to return. During the course of the war, 6 million United States servicemen and women came through North Platte, Nebraska. And every single train was met. And the story would go something like this. A guy would say, I graduated from Brooklyn High School, never been out of New York City. Went down and signed up on Monday. They put me on a train going west. I rode for 3 days and nights, sitting up, eating K rations, not taking a shower. And somebody in the middle of the night said, North Platte, Nebraska, next stop. Never heard of North Platte, Nebraska. Jumped off the train, ran into a place, and I saw girls who looked like my sisters and my cousins, and women who looked like my aunts and my mom. And they had all this food, and they gave it to us. And when we left, they hugged us, and they said, Sailor, we're praying for you. God bless you. We get back on the train, scared out of our minds, not knowing where we were going, not knowing if we'd ever come back. But when we went into that place for 10 minutes, something went away. We got back on the train, and we went on. And in the middle of the night in France, with mortars coming down, when there was a lull in the fighting, a voice would come out of the darkness saying, wouldn't it be great to be back in North Platte for 5 minutes? Because love chases away fear. And when Bob Greene interviewed these guys, they'd start crying. 85-year-old guys start crying. Say, what are you crying for? He said, because here I was, an 18-year-old kid, scared to death. And I went into that place, and for 5 minutes in the middle of the night, in a place I'd never been to with people I'd never met, going to a place I didn't know, somebody loved me and was kind to me. I told this story in Denver a couple years ago at the 60th anniversary of Youth for Christ Campus Life. The young woman came up to me the next morning and said, when you were telling that story, I thought about my grandpa. My grandpa was in the Navy, and he lived in Pennsylvania, and I wondered, did he go through North Platte, Nebraska? She said, my grandpa's 90 years old in a nursing home, and he has dementia. He doesn't remember us most of the time. But I called him, and I said, Grandpa, this is Jennifer. And I said, Grandpa, does the name North Platte, Nebraska mean anything to you? And he said, North Platte, Nebraska. Instantly, he was lucid. You bet it does. He said, I went in there and they gave me donuts and sandwiches and coffee, and they shined my shoes. You bet I remember North Platte, Nebraska. What is it, 60 years after the fact, that brings a 90-year-old man out of dementia? When you're scared and you're 18 and you're going off to war, and on the way, somebody loves you and is kind to you.
We should supply tissues with them.
No, tell me about it, yeah. So very powerful video, obviously, and we really tried our hardest to make our canteen similar to that. And I've got some beautiful testimonials, but we're a little shy on time, that talk about the need of a place like our canteen. So I encourage everybody here to swing by the facility and take a peek at it, and if you're a veteran, please come and join us at one of the canteens. Let's go to the next slide, Ryan. I think we're just about done. Volunteering and our integration philosophy, the spirit of giving back. I think we kind of all talked about that, meaning our service footprint. Just so you know, one of the ways we keep our culinary program and our canteens alive is we do have a U-Pick strawberry field. And we have about 3 acres run by all volunteers, so I would encourage everybody to come out and take advantage of that. Our SSVF grant, which is the homeless grant, I referred you to that earlier. We do have a $1.6 million operating budget. All donations and all grants are direct program. I'm free. I do not get paid. I think that's important right now for the mission. We do culinary events. We do them strictly for the mission, for our veterans and our military. The military uses our facility to do their strategic planning. It's very similar to a Camp David. They get off the base, they come to a quiet location, they get that beautiful view, and then they go and protect and serve us. The community dog training program, I didn't mention this earlier, but we're launching this in the next couple of weeks, and that is available and open to the community, that if you have a dog and you want it to be trained, you would come to ClearPath, you would have a professional trainer, and one of the vets from the dog program assist that trainer in helping you with some basic obedience. Another way we sustain ourselves. In New York State, in general, we have a lot of historical significance. I live on a family farm that is a Revolutionary War tract, and it is still intact, believe it or not. We are a rural state, so our outreach is aggressive. I've sat at many tables where people tell us we're too far out of the way. And I say, hell no, we're not, because the people who live in the city aren't the people you're trying to reach. So I've really been a real advocate and a mouthpiece for the rural community. Our model is innovative in that we're dovetailing some of the traditional things that we used to do as a community in with some of the modern day resources that are available. So that's pretty much it. And I know, Louis, you gave me some questions that you wanted me to answer. And I'd rather just kind of open it up to the floor if anybody has any questions. Yeah.
Number one, the food at the Ridge is excellent.
Good to hear.
Number two.
I can't take credit for that, that's my sister.
That's all right. Number two, are you familiar with the housing project that's on East Genesee Street for veterans? And is that successful? And my actual other question is, do you need volunteers like us?
Absolutely. So I'll answer the first question. Thank you for the Ridge food. Sometimes we serve our burger from our farm. The second thing is the housing you're referring to is called Van Kuren Square. And Van Kuren Square is that transitional, permanent transitional, meaning they come out of homelessness and they go there. And is that successful? Yes and no. Yes, in that people are not living on the streets. No, that there is no wraparound services provided for the veterans that live there. So going back to that resource model, what really makes things successful is when you have continual peer support and wraparound services. So if we silo issues, they are not nearly as successful as they are if you do them in a holistic approach. Does that answer your question? And to a volunteer, yes, you can always volunteer.
Where is it on East Genesee Street?
So it's couple of different ways. There's a volunteer form online, or if you just stop out and get a quick tour, we can have you fill out a volunteer form then, and then you could meet the volunteer coordinator or one of the staff. I should have brought some with me today, and I didn't.
And what kind of volunteering do people like us do?
So you can do, there's a lot of outreach tables, like we go out and have tables, information tables at events. We have phone calls, follow-ups, is everything going well? We have strawberry picking. We have sitting at the strawberry tent. Sometimes we have serving food at a canteen. Sometimes we have Saturday meals. There's a whole wide variety of